Hey everybody, Mike with Games Played Badly, and today on Session Zero I have a very special guest. Some of you know Trevor from some of his voiceover work, but he also has an amazing YouTube channel called Me, Myself, and I. And on this episode, that's exactly what we talk about. He has taken the art form of solo RPG playing to a new level in my book. I think it's just fantastic. And we talk about how he uses the tools at his disposal to go ahead and make that happen, what tools he uses, and what his motivation was for all of this. So I cannot wait for you to meet Trevor. He is awesome. As usual, I have my Gem Firefly shirt on. This is my Games Played Badly shirt. Trevor has his own shirt, by the way, and we'll talk more about that in the video, but and other merch. But if you would like to get one of these shirts, feel free to go up to gemfirefly.com. Why do I always do? I always do that. Gemfirefly.com and pick out whatever shirt you like. And at checkout, put in our code BADLY15, BADLY 15 at checkout for 15% off your order. Thank you again for watching our videos. I really appreciate it. If you have not hit the subscribe button, please do so now. If you like this video or any of the other videos that you watch, please like and comment on them. I would love to hear back from you. And as I mentioned in several videos prior, we do have a new website. It's right here, gamesplaybadly.com, which my husband designed, and I love to pieces. And it's a great way for you to be able to go up and see all of our content in one spot. Just because it's up there doesn't mean don't subscribe, because we need you to subscribe as well. So Trevor is right around the corner. That interview starts now. Hey Trevor, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yes, I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. I have been following your channel for a bit, and I've loved it because I find it so entertaining. How did you come up with the idea of some of the solo role play as far as a channel theme?
Well, I've said this before, but it bears repeating. I did not know people did that. I did not know solo role-playing was a thing. I did it when I started because I know all the Critical Role folks because I worked with them in LA. And, you know, over the years they said, oh yeah, you gotta come on, you gotta join the game and stuff. But it just never materialized. And then one point I was thinking about doing sort of a different kind of show with a different game company and with a bunch of voice actors, blah, 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 but didn't materialize. And then I thought, wait a minute, I can't get these people together because, you know, getting voice actors together is like herding cats, as they say.
Yeah,
and, and then I thought, wait a minute, I don't need anybody else. I can play everybody. Wouldn't that be hilarious to play all the characters, to run the game by myself? And I knew about Mythic GM Emulator because I'd used it as a tool in my regular games before. And I'd used it as well to sort of like design adventures and things like that. It's a great tool for that when you're designing adventures for your table. So I thought, oh, won't this be an hilarious gimmick that no one's ever done before? And so I did it, and then all of these people come out of the woodwork going, oh yes, no, I've been playing by myself for many years. And I was like, what? And they talked about this community of solo role players, and I'm like, you see, that's an oxymoron, right? That doesn't really work, the community of solo. But I got to tell you, they've been the most supportive community out there. It's been they're very loyal, they're very faithful, they're very pleasant and kind and all the good things. So yeah, no, so you know, the short version of the story is I started it as kind of a joke, and I realized it wasn't, and then I started to really like it. I was like, oh, this is actually super fun. So yeah.
I early on in this channel, I started this channel a couple of years ago, and one of my earlier interviews was actually somebody who was doing solo role play as well, and I'd never heard about it before. I thought it was kind of wacky.
Yeah, I don't think it's funny because in every human society there's a hierarchy structure, and there's no difference in the gaming world, right? Like you get all of these geeks who are playing role-playing games, pretending around to be elves, and they look at people doing that but by themselves and they go, what a bunch of nerds.
I have to say it was a little I guess you're right. I never really thought about it that way, but you know, it's one of those things. It's for me, it's very entertaining. Because the way that you do it, you get to see DM craft real time. So I look at it and I'm going, okay, well, I'm living and dying off all these random rolls that you're making for all these situations, but I'm also getting an idea of how you're connecting the dots between these very disparate ideas sometimes. I mean, you have some real out there wacky things that happen, and then you somehow tie it back, like poor Carlos, who is, you know, I mean, he wasn't even there, and this wacky monster comes and grabs him and brings it back to the. It was just it was absolutely nuts. But you had to connect those dots. That's amazing. You're really good at it.
Well, thank you. It's my it's my favorite part of the whole process actually is seeing how I can do that, how I can not only tie together these completely crazy random concepts and make them all play together,
Hmm.
but also to be able to sort of do that as a retcon, right? Because you
Hmm.
have no other choice, because as you're creating things on the fly, there's going to be elements that come up that in that moment might not make sense, but it's only 3 episodes later when you go, oh, that ties to this thing that just
Yeah,
happened.
right.
Now I have to say that the Mythic emulator tool has a very great way of handling that, because it allows you to keep track of not only your chaos factor, which determines
Hmm.
the probabilities of things, but also your list of characters and your list of threads. And when you get random events, you're drawing upon what has come before already. So,
Hmm.
on the table, you could roll and it would say, advance a thread. Well, what that means is you've already introduced this thread idea. So now the random event is going to further that idea,
Hmm.
again, randomly, because you're picking one by random.
Right.
But it all gets tied together. And is it luck? I don't know. I think there's obviously a lot of luck that goes into it. But when I look at all 3 seasons of my show, even Iron Sworn has its own system, but it's not too far removed from the Mythic emulator thing.
Hmm.
When I look at the storyline of each season, I'm actually super proud of it, because somehow it all had an arc and it all kind of wraps up tidily at the
Hmm.
end. And I'm like, I'm not even sure how that happened, but I can feel it when it's happening. When I'm coming close to the end, I can feel it.
Hmm.
I've been in show business my whole life, so maybe that's just inherent. I
Sure,
can
sure.
sense the end coming, but
Well, yeah.
I try not to force it though. I try and let it happen organically.
It really, in my book, I watch it and I'm going, man, these are some great stories that have been completely randomly generated, or at least those pivotal moments where you're trying to connect things together. So I mean, it's a testament to your creativity that this works. I mean, those things where I was just trying to do it mentally, like how would I couldn't do it that quickly. I mean, it's amazing to watch you on camera just kind of go through this stuff and snap it up. It's great. It's great.
Well, thank you. Yes, I am blessed with being quick on my feet when it comes to that stuff.
Hmm.
However, it is a fully edited show. So there are times when, there could be a full 30 seconds of me going, what does this mean?
Hmm.
How does this connect before I cut to the next shot, right?
Sure.
So I'm not that quick all
Right,
the
right.
time,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But honestly,
That,
I cut that stuff out because this is a show first and foremost, and I
mhm.
want it to be entertaining, and I want it to be entertaining to people who are outside of the RPG world as well. My
Sure.
ultimate goal is to have people who know nothing about fantasy role-playing games going, I don't know what the hell this is, but I can't take my eyes off it because the story's so compelling. And I've been very lucky to have a lot of people say that to me. So that's been a huge compliment as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I find is those random mechanics don't really get in the way of the story. I mean, it's one of those things where you're checking a table or taking a look at something, but it's with the delight and glee and sometimes absolute horror that you go through that process of looking at it, and that furthers my interest because you're having a good time. So that's very good. The other thing is, outside of if you're not doing enough already, then you're voicing all these characters. And I obviously you're a voice actor, so that's kind of your thing. I have two voices that I can use reliably in D&D, and one is a Bronx accent and the other one is a really bad British accent, and that's it. How do you go about keeping all these things straight?
Well, I've been doing voice work for 22 years. So again,
Mhm.
it's ingrained in me. And I've been doing voices and accents since literally 5 years old. So I've been doing it my whole life. So for me, it comes very naturally. But I do want to say that, the job of a GM is not to have a repertoire of character voices. The job of the
Mhm.
GM is to represent the world. And there's many,
Right.
many ways of doing that. My friend Ross, who's an excellent GM, he can't do voices to save his life, but it doesn't matter because when he portrays his NPCs, it's
Mhm.
about his choice of words as the character is speaking. It's about
Mhm.
his physical bearing. It's about
Mhm.
mannerisms. So you know exactly what NPC you're talking to, even though they sound all the same. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yep.
So there's And I think that maybe there's a lot of new players, especially to D&D 5e, thanks to
Hmm.
Critical Role, that have, you've heard about the Mercer effect, right? About
Sure,
how
sure,
old
yeah.
people think that this is what a game is. And there's a lot of
Hmm.
old school gamers out there who really resent that because they're like, no, that's not what it is. Don't let these actors tell you.
Yeah.
And so I get it. I'm sympathetic to that viewpoint. Matt and Travis and that whole gang, they're super talented. But the vast majority of people playing role-playing games are not professional voice actors sitting around
Absolutely, right.
putting on a show, right? They're
Hmm.
they're having an experience, they're having a shared imagined experience together.
Hmm.
And the focus should never be on a performance, right?
Right.
The focus should be on just being honest and representing the world of
Hmm.
your game. True. That's my opinion. That's the job of a GM, right? So
No,
you know,
yeah,
I
I completely agree with you. Yeah, there were a lot of initial complaints because I think we're probably both from the standpoint of we played D&D for a long time. And when Critical Role came out, I loved it because it got people interested into a genre that was, I hate to say it, but it was kind of floundering at that point. I mean,
right.
D&D, if you weren't kind of on the inside already playing it, they weren't really reaching out and grabbing new players. So I think it's done a great thing for the hobby as a whole and just for gaming in general. It's kind of like Will Wheaton's tabletop when he did that whole series that brought board gaming back from out of nowhere, and all of a sudden you see board games flying off the shelves. So,
Yeah,
but I completely agree with you.
yeah, it's interesting because like I said, I know those guys. So when I hear people, it's so funny. There's some forums that I sometimes sort of lurk on, and I'll see a lot of these what I suspect are old school kind of
Hmm.
grognard types going, "Oh, Critical Role is clearly scripted," and I'm like, "It's really not, guys. It's
Right,
really
right.
it's really not." And I just it's fascinating to be that then when people see when the normies, when the regular folk see people in show business doing something, they automatically assume that it's phony or fake or scripted or
Sure.
staged. And
Yeah.
being one of those guys, one of those Hollywood types, uh, it,
You
it,
gotta
it
look down your yes,
yes,
yep.
that's right. My goodness. It makes me laugh, but it also kind of breaks my heart because I'm like, no,
Yeah,
I'm just like you. I'm
right,
just like
right.
you. I just happen to be able to do voices, but there's no difference. My games are just like your games.
Mhm.
Maybe a little faster paced because I tend to move pretty quickly.
Right. Well, and that's what I'm watching you play all these characters, keep track of storylines, roll random bits that you have to tie together. That's all fantastic. I started thinking like I'm wonder what his table looks like when you guys actually when you don't play with yourself.
Which was one of the working titles of the show. Thank God we didn't use.
Oh, whew. So, I mean, because I know COVID has definitely it took a toll on all of us, and especially those people who game. And so we found new and creative ways to play remotely. But when you are actually running an adventure, do you still use a lot of those tools that you use for the solo stuff to randomize everything?
Yeah, it totally depends on the table. I'm lucky to have many. I have
Hmm.
I have my regular group here in
Hmm.
San Antonio that we play in person, and they're fantastic. I've got my old guys back in Edmonton. I've got my people in Vancouver. I have some people in LA. So
Hmm.
we do, luckily as well, because I moved to LA. Well, I moved to Vancouver in '98. That was
Hmm.
long, obviously, before Roll20 or the internet was
Hmm. Sure.
a usable tool for this kind of thing.
Hmm.
But when I moved to LA, Roll20 was starting to happen, and we were starting to be able to achieve the dream of being able to play virtually from everywhere. Because, I have one of my best friends moved away to Ottawa when we were kids, and well, not kids, I guess, early 20s. And we always wanted to bring it back in the game, but there was no real way to do that. Well, now there was because of these
Yeah.
tools. So I was in LA and I started to run the One Ring, the first edition One Ring with my guys in Edmonton. And we played that every week online. And it was fantastic because we were all very skeptical of the whole online thing. But what wound
Hmm.
up happening was they would all still gather around the table in Brian's place,
Hmm.
but then they would have a monitor up at the head of the table where I would normally sit. And
Yeah.
there I was at the head of the table, and because I could see the camera, and I could see them all sitting around the table. So
Uh-huh.
very quickly it became like you forgot that you weren't actually
Right.
in the room, which was fascinating. But then yes, and the COVID thing happened, and people weren't joining anywhere anymore, and so it was a bunch of talking heads, and
Hmm.
and that's fine and good. Obviously, it's enabled a lot of people to play different ways. It's enabled
Hmm.
me to be able to continue running games and playing games with my people all over the world. But nothing beats in person. And
Right.
I am afraid and this may sound a bit like old man yells at a cloud, but I am a bit afraid that the future of D&D, especially
Uh-huh.
because we know where they're going. They're going the one D&D thing. They're going entirely virtual. They're going to try and monetize everything, and everything is going to be, if you want to play D&D, it's assumed you're doing it online. And I really think something vital is going to be lost, because
Yeah.
playing the game around the table with other living, breathing, talking human beings, there is nothing that can replace that
Agreed.
currently. There's no technology. And
Right.
so the more that Wizards of the Coast pushes towards that as the default way, I think in 20 years, the game, I don't think it's going to look the way that it does now, which is fine. Things evolve, but I'm afraid they might lose something. I don't know. It's a thing,
Yeah, Trevor, I think you hit the nail on the head. I've thought that for the last year or two here, that, people get comfortable sitting in their underwear in their own home, playing with people and not really having to interact. I feel like I agree. I think that table experience may be lost. And it's such a vital thing for me to be able to actually sit and watch people's posture and how they're fiddling with things because they're nervous about something. I mean, it all adds to that gaming element that I love. I mean, it's now the virtual stuff. I love that too because I got a chance to play with people all over the world as well that I've never met before, and people just like, hey, let's get together and play. Sure, but I mean, that table experience is so critical, at least for me, and obviously for you. So
Yeah, I mean, the thing is too is that with the online thing, there's a certain discipline that you need in order to get out of the house and go to the game every Friday night.
hmm
There's a certain mental discipline that we're doing this, and that can
hmm
only help. That can only help the game, because now you have people choosing to make this little effort in order
hmm
to partake in this experience, and that changes everything. Or the other thing, as we learned through the couple of years of COVID there with the whole Zoom thing,
hmm
Zoom conversations. I did a lot of sessions remotely, even though I was still in LA, but of course, no
hmm
one's going anywhere. And what I found was you were exhausted after those sessions simply because in this format here, as I'm looking at your face,
hmm
my brain is trying to interpret your facial expressions
right.
that the brain can't see, that the eyes can't see. I can't perceive it because it's not in person. No
hmm
camera high def enough to match the human eye. And so
right.
your brain is overcompensating. And I think that's the thing that kind of turns me off long sessions online, is the lack of discipline, because,
hmm
hey, like you say, you're in your underwear and you can just,
right.
just duck out anytime you want, or start surfing on another
Oh, I
open
hate that.
window. Right. Whereas you'd never dream of doing that around a table, I would
hmm
hope. But it becomes exhausting physically,
Yeah.
as your brain is overworking in order, you don't have that around the table, anyway.
Right. Yeah. Again, I agree with you on that. I mean, I think there's a level of commitment that is demonstrated by actually getting up and going to a game. And it's also an investment of time and energy for everybody to be able to get together and play. I don't mind the remote stuff, but I know it's completely different. I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah,
It is the world we live in now.
it
I'm
is.
not going to shout at the rain, but
No. And there are certain advantages, obviously, to like you say, you can play with people all over the world in different time zones and stuff. You can also have access to music and effects and all these things that, well, it certainly changes the experience. I don't know if it
mhm,
necessarily heightens it, but it certainly makes it its own thing.
sure.
It's funny because I'm playing a Pathfinder 2 game online. I'm a player in it, and they're using Foundry.
Okay.
And the Foundry people were good enough to send me a copy so I could check it out, and I'm still kind of playing around with it. But it's funny, I have a sort of mixed feelings about Foundry, because as an online tool, yes, it's fantastic. It's, oh my God, you can see your characters and the lighting effects and
Mhm.
and and it does all the roles for you. And I think,
Oh God.
why are you playing the game if you're not actually, playing the game? If you're
Right.
not actually rolling the dice and understanding the systems. Oh, but it's great, everything's automated. Okay, so you never actually have to learn the game? Or
Yeah.
like, it kind of feels like it's trying to be a video game, and it'll
Yes.
never be a video game. That's the
Yeah.
thing. Like, boy, I'm going off a real rant here. I think that
It's all
the the
right.
the power of a role-playing game is its ability to have everybody at the table engage in a completely unique form of entertainment. You're neither
Absolutely.
actor nor observer, you're neither author nor reader. You are all of those things at the same time.
Mhm.
And so to try and And to try and put that into a video game environment, which is essentially what the Foundry environment is.
Mhm.
Look how great. Now you don't have to use your imagination. You can see exactly what this looks like. But using your imagination is the whole point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I'm kind
No,
of
I get you on that one too, because I just recently started a new group with my niece and one of our friends' sons and one of our neighbors. I said, "Hey, everybody, let's get together and play some D&D." And so the great thing is you have things like D&D and Beyond where you can have your characters up there, but all they have to do is touch the page and it rolls everything for them. They don't understand where the modifiers are coming from or why things are
right.
doing what they're doing. And
Right.
so I completely so what I've actually done is for Christmas I went and got them all books. I
Yeah.
said, "Here's
Oh,
a
oh my
physical
God.
book."
Books, actual
Yeah,
books.
right. I was like, "Here's a physical book. You can sit down, have a cup of coffee, and read through it." And I have my neighbor Jamie, God bless him, almost read that thing cover to cover. You want
Oh,
to talk about a snooze fest?
no kidding.
I mean, cover to cover. But yeah, I completely agree with you. I think the overall, that's what I felt like fourth edition was. Fourth edition was very much an MMORPG, wow, instant gratification,
Yes.
give me my loot type
Yes.
thing. And I did like the elements of that they were really starting to push miniatures and, physical maps and things like that. I like that a lot. But I thought the overall core of it, and no one hate me for saying this, I didn't dig it. I thought it was, again, it was way too easy to get things, you're walking around with like huge magical items by the time you're like third level. It's like, holy
Yeah,
smokes.
and two things could be true at once, right? It was clearly designed to be a tabletop representation of an MMO,
Mhm.
clearly. At the same time, what is also true is it was really well designed for what it was trying to do.
Sure. Yeah.
People talk about how combat was so much fun in that game. I'm sure it
Mhm.
was, because it was so specifically tailored to just be about that. And
Yeah. Right.
that's fine. But at that point, are you really playing a role-playing game anymore, or are you playing a
Yeah.
tactical minis game? And again, hey, I play everything. I love everything.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm kind of with you on that. I mean, I dropped out of D&D after a D&D. I came
Oh,
back to it
wow.
briefly at
Mhm.
3.5 to run a campaign and went,
Mhm.
all right, that's enough of that. And then I was introduced to 5e and I ran a tiny little campaign in that
Mhm.
the Fandelver
Yeah. Mine's over
Saunders,
Fandelver.
yeah, which I had to completely change to, fix all of the glaring errors in that. But it was fun. It was fun. But at the same time, I'm like, yeah, it's still just D&D. It still has all the things that I hate about D&D. Nothing's changed. Some things have gotten worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I think what I love about what you do also is you're using different systems. First of all, I mean, like the solo role play is one thing. Then you have your Sage library, which is awesome because you get a chance to go through and really do a little bit of a deep dive into different systems. And so I like that because I look at it and go, "Wow, maybe I'll try that," or "Maybe I'll try
good,
this," or
good.
so. Yeah, right. I think it's wonderful that you're able to showcase that. On top of all of that, you have videos that explain the tools that you're using and how to use them, which I think is infinitely helpful. And if we're talking about game systems, I hate to try and pin you down, but what would be your top two game systems that you really enjoy playing?
Oh, that's impossible to say because every system does a different thing, right? It
Sure,
scratches a
sure.
different itch. I will say that my favorite fantasy game of all time is Hardmaster 3, Hardmaster
Hmm.
3rd edition, which most people have never even heard of, but
Mm-mm.
it's my favorite game of all time, but I still house rule it heavily. For example, I
Hmm.
take the magic system from Mars Magica and I redesigned it to fit into Hardmaster 3. So
Hmm.
my favorite game is already a hybrid of two games. So it depends what the situation is. I love Free League's products. I love their house system of the Year Zero engine, which they use
Hmm.
in Mutant Year Zero and Forbidden Lands, Twilight 2000, Blade Runner, Alien. They're all just variations on that theme. I love it. I
Hmm.
love that company. They're my favorite gaming company right now. I think they're the best company out there, frankly. Their
Very
products
good.
are
Yeah.
super solid. I sound like I'm their PR manager or something, but
No,
I
you're
really
you're
do.
not shilling for them.
I really do love the company and their stuff. I'm running a Vampire the Masquerade game right now, which is
Hmm.
hilarious because I know nothing about Vampire. Like I never played it. I only
Hmm.
became aware of it when Vampire the Requiem came out with the New World of Darkness back in 2008 or thereabouts.
Hmm.
So I'm running V5, but with only the mechanics. None of the
Hmm.
setting stuff is there. It's
Right,
all
right.
just my own setting, sort of inspired by the Requiem setting. So it's funny, we were talking about this on Friday night at the game about how if we had some true Vampire the Masquerade player come to my table,
Hmm.
they'd rage quit and leave because it looks nothing at all like the game that they would expect it to be.
Right.
But I love the mechanics of that. It's super fun. It's a dice pool of D10s, and you've got these hunger dice that constantly screw you up because you're playing a monster, and so of course you're going to be controlled a little bit by your beast. It's quite genius.
Oh yeah, when you start looking at things like that, when we start talking about customizing games, I think that's the most fun. And I recently had an experience where we were playing and somebody said, "Oh, that's not the way it works." I was like, oh, it's not. Well, the books, no, I know what the book says, but this is more fun. I can guarantee you. So, but that customization of, again, you taking various pieces from various systems to make it your own, I think is a critical part of any gaming experience.
Yeah, and I don't know any GM who does not house rule their games. I certainly don't. I mean, my rule of thumb is I always play a game raw first. I always play it exactly by the book. To begin with, because I want to understand the designer's intent. I want to, because if you start pulling at threads on the tapestry, you don't know what that's going to unravel on the other side of the tapestry unless you understand the tapestry's construction first.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I always try and give that a shot, but guaranteed within session 4 or 5, I'm like, okay, we need to change this. We need to do this.
Yeah,
and that's just the way it works, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, you're gonna find those crunchy bits, and you're there. Anything that impedes the speed of play or takes people out of that imaginary or theater of the mind, I try to remove. A lot of the mundane, like in one of your videos, you were talking about there was some game that you were playing where people were tracking actual individual bullets and all that's. I mean, that stuff, yes, mechanically, if that's what the game is, that's what the game is. But I try to avoid all of that. I mean, I don't know the last time anybody had to buy rations in a game that I ran, or
yeah, I mean, I understand that, but again, it depends on what experience you're looking to provide. If you're looking to provide a really harsh survivalist experience, then
absolutely
each bullet matters and rations count. What's hilarious is when I ran this Minds of Phandelver game, I immediately I broke my own rule. I house ruled to start because I looked at 5e and went, yeah, no, I know what this is. No, but it's too easy. The travel rules are non-existent. I'm gonna bring in travel rules that I've used before in other D&D games, and it's gonna be great. Well, it wasn't great. It was awful because that game, that iteration of D&D has nothing to do with exploration or survival, two of the main staples of most D&D games since 1978.
Yeah,
it has nothing to do with that. It's all about superheroes doing superhero things, which whatever. That's a whole other conversation. But the focus of that game had nothing to do with tracking rations or survivalists. But I was trying to jam down its throat this survivalist thing, and it didn't work. There are some games where it really doesn't make sense. I'm looking at the Free League's Blade Runner game right now, and they're very explicit, as they very often are, about saying things like encumbrance rules. This isn't a game about collecting loot. Just use your common sense. I'm like, yeah, exactly. Because you're playing Blade Runner. You're tracking down replicants. You're not, how many pounds is your leather vest? Like, relevant.
Yeah, I mean, well, and that's the other. I've told people in various games, encumbrance especially, because it can be really cumbersome. And so I tell them, as long as you're not trying to carry around a 5,000 pound safe, we're normally okay.
As long as you're not a character from Skyrim with like 80 different swords and
oh god
in your inventory.
Right, exactly. It's like, I think no. So you're into season 3. Are you done with season 3 at this point?
Done with season 3, yes.
Okay. And what's next?
Well,
is there season 4 coming?
Eventually, I'm kind of moving away from the world of Simon, Arn, and Edbert for a little while. I'm doing a campaign in 5 parsecs from home right now, which is
oh, I did see that. Yes.
Yeah, it's a science fiction miniatures adventure game. It's what I always wanted Warhammer 40K to be, which was not just about the fight, but about the story of these characters and the campaign elements of these characters, and the fact that they go into these battles, but the battles have consequences. And the reason why they're in the battle is important. So it's not just, hey, I have my army and your army and we fight. Yeah. Who cares? I mean, obviously, a lot of people care. If you're a 40K fan, great, all the power to you. But
Don't cancel me, please.
yeah.
I just invite him on the show. It's not my fault.
But so I really love that game. Having a lot of fun. I've done 3 episodes of that. I'll take it as long as it's still of interest to people. So we'll see how long that is. Or I might just say to hell with you. I don't care if you're watching. I'm going to finish this damn thing. Honestly, that's probably what I'm going to do. You know, I could do maybe by the 15th episode there'll be 3 views, and I'll be like, well, too bad. To hell with you. I like it. Not a great business model for YouTube, frankly.
Believe me, you're preaching to the choir on this one. You know, I have 50 or 60 interviews up, you know, and it's like I do it for myself. I don't do it for if people want to watch, and they've been very gracious to watch, and because I think highlighting people who create things is important, because a lot of times you don't know what that secret sauce is, you know, and so that's why I try to get is what makes this game awesome, or this module that you wrote. So it is what it is. People watch or they don't watch, but I'm still doing them. Yeah. And my husband is already ticked off that I converted our basement into a total filming studio. So I better use it. Use it. So with Christmas coming up, you do have some merch. I see an awesome shirt on.
Yes.
I'll trade you shirts.
Hey, look at us. Look at us shilling for ourselves. We're total sellouts.
Scrapping.
Yeah. Yes, I do. We have handmade merchandise on my website, which is memyselfandie.com. We make everything, as I said, by hand right here. There's shirts, and there's mugs, and there's glasses, and dice bags. We're working on a few new things as well. But right now, for the month of December, there's the Christmas mug, which is the logo with a little Santa hat on it. And right now, through the month of December, everything there is 10% off with code HO at checkout.
Ho, ho, ho.
Yeah.
I'll have all those details down below, but I'm going to have to write it down because I forget things. Yes. Let me see. I had some talking points, but I think we've talked about all of them. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on.
My pleasure to be here.
Any questions for me? Nobody asked me any questions ever.
Well, you're the interviewer.
I know. It's lonely at the top.
So you said you've done 60 interviews.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Wow. With like what, writers, designers?
Yes. Yeah. So I have one interview with a gentleman who's actually creating a tabletop board game, which was really interesting because I wanted to kind of see what that was like. I've interviewed people who write modules for various gaming systems. I have interviewed kind of community members in the TTRPG space who are doing some good stuff. She's on Twitter. She's very, very helpful. I have interviewed people who create, weirdly enough, TTRPG jewelry, and it's just gorgeous. I mean, and she actually sat and demonstrated how she creates things. And then, so I've interviewed a whole host of people, but it revolves around gaming and people who create things. And I want to make sure, especially artists, you know, so when I talk to people who are creating games, they talk about I always ask about the artwork, because I feel like the artists always go unappreciated. So I make sure that I highlight those as well. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I've met a lot of amazing people throughout the community and from around the world. I talked to somebody in Japan a couple months ago. So yeah, it's been wild.
My first interview about this show was with a guy in Switzerland, and I forget his name, but he has a YouTube channel as well. And he was one of the first, as far as I know, he was one of the first like pioneering kind of solo role player guys. But he got a hold of me out of the blue and said, "Oh, I'd love to have you on." And I was like, that was the first time I knew that there was a thing called solo role playing that people were doing, because I was like, what? There's more of you? What?
Right.
But yeah.
It's a very diverse community. People are so creative. I interview a lot of indie game creators who just have some ideas that I never would have thought of, which is the reason why I'm not writing a game. So, but just the coolest stuff, and so kind with their time to sit down with, you know, I mean, I'm no Tom Brokaw. So that being said, yeah, well, I definitely appreciate you coming on, and thank you for spending some time with me and chatting about, wow, there was stuff written down here, I swear, but we kind of covered everything. I love it.
Good.
Yeah. Hopefully we can do it again. It would be a lot of fun.
Indeed.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
But have a great afternoon. Enjoy everything, and I wish you all the best of luck. If there's anything you need from me, please let me know.
Okay, thank you.